What up, Cavs Nation? I'm your host, Ethan Sands, and I'm back with another episode of the Wine and Gold Talk podcast. I am joined by your favorite beat reporter, the man that held it down yesterday when I was away, Chris Fedor. What up, Chris?
What's going on, Ethan? How are you, man?
I'm doing all right. I wanted to get into the travel that we talked about. We were talking about this before the podcast started, and we mentioned different cities before and how you like to go to certain places. And I think Charlotte's a pretty cool city, but you put me on to a nugget that I didn't know when it comes to traveling. This might just be because you're a platinum member almost everywhere you go, but I think this is something really cool. Chris does not bring toothbrushes on short road trips. Is that right, Chris?
Yeah, on the short ones, there's no need for it. Because then I have to lug around, the charger for my electric toothbrush, the carrying case for my electric toothbrush. And I just bring a carry-on these short little trips. And everything that I need to fit in there basically fits in there. And if I start adding different kinds of things to it, then it starts to get a little bit dicey in terms of how much room I have and how heavy it gets and all that kind of nonsense. So you stay at Marriott's, right?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, all right, thank God. I thought you were doing it all wrong. So every Marriott that you stay at, you go to the front desk and you request a dental kit. And they have a toothbrush and they have toothpaste and they give it to you.
This is brand new information. I know some of our listeners are...
Are you serious?
Yeah, this is brand new, man. I got an electric toothbrush too, and I'm used to just lugging my stuff around and trying to figure out how I can plug into outlets because, not all bathrooms have like those outlets that you need. So, yeah, sometimes it's definitely been a struggle, but I know our listeners who are already giving me some flack on just my takes on the podcast are already shaking their heads. But I promise you, you're going to be shaking your heads a little bit more about what we get into.
Well, here's the problem, though, Ethan. This came back to bite me in the butt here, okay? And now I may have to rethink my whole routine when it comes to these road trips because the hotel that I'm staying at, I'm not going to out them. I'm not going to call them because it's one that I usually stay at very close to the arena here. It's a very close walk, and I like walking downtown and whatnot. So this hotel does not have any toothbrushes. They are out of them completely. And they're still waiting for their shipment. I went down to the front desk. They told me no. I called housekeeping personally. I dropped the whole Titanium Elite thing. You better believe that I did that. And they told me no, they don't have any. I asked them if they had any for purchase, which I'm totally against, just on its principles. They said no, they don't have any for purchase. I asked them to give me directions to a CVS or a 7-Eleven. They sent me to a 7-Eleven about a half mile away, about a 15-minute walk. Closed. Closed.
Oh my goodness.
A chain on the door with a huge ass padlock. Even though the lights are on, even though the sign says that it's open 24 hours, and even though the light of 7-Eleven on the outside is illuminated, shining like a beacon towards people that need to go to 7-Eleven late at night, closed. So I looked on my Google Maps as I was walking back from the arena, and I looked for a CVS, closed. I looked for a Walgreens, closed. Everything downtown that would have a toothbrush that I could buy, closed. So here's what I have to do, because I'm the guy who feels like he doesn't have to pack a toothbrush because Marriott will take care of me, because every single time I've done this, they have taken care of me. They've had a dental kit for me. I had to go on DoorDash, and I had to order a toothbrush and toothpaste from a Walgreens about 8 miles away, and now some person from DoorDash, his name is Rafik. Rafik is my dasher. He is going to this Walgreens 8 miles away, shopping for me, and dropping it off at this hotel.
That's an insane story, and I can't imagine.
I am so mad right now. You don't even understand.
Especially because you get to the city before a game a day before. So this has just been a trek. And also, I cannot let this go by. This man is not platinum, I'm sorry. Titanium Elite.
I was ambassador, by the way, and I lost that status somehow, some way. I don't think I spent enough money at Marriott over the last year or something like that.
I don't know how that's possible.
I was ambassador. I had my own butler, which was amazing, by the way, but not anymore. Only titanium elite. And to your point, yes, I usually do get there the night before, but I wanted to steal a night at home so that I could be with my family an extra night. And it's such a short flight to Charlotte that I felt like I can get away with it flying in the day of the game. So I took an early morning flight. I made sure that I was there last night, went out to dinner with my wife and my son. I was there to put him down. It was great. We had a great night. And I got up really, really early to take an early flight to Charlotte so that I could be here. I obviously couldn't check into my hotel yet, but I dropped off my bags and all that other stuff. And now that decision backfires too. Because had I done this last night, had I checked in last night like I usually do the night before, I maybe would have been able to find a CVS before it closed.
Or at least at minimum, you would have known that they didn't have the toothbrushes at the counter.
That's right. But tonight, I didn't have time to go to CVS or Walgreens before the game. I just went straight to the game. And by the time it was over and I walked out of the arena probably around like 10:45 or something like that after updating the gamer, everything in downtown was closed.
So, although we have taken about 10 minutes
Oh, it's
already
fine.
of this
It's fine.
podcast,
I needed to vent, clearly.
Chris said we got until 12 something to get this done for the DoorDasher. So, we're going to speed run through this game.
Rafik is supposed to arrive at 12:17. He is currently shopping for my items, and I'm very appreciative of that. I added an extra tip because this is such a ridiculous request at midnight, but I have no other choice.
Yeah, I think that's a different podcast talking about tipping and how tipping culture has changed over the last couple of years because of COVID. But I think we need to get into some Cavs hoops, as Jared Allen would say.
I've got 3 minutes to add to my order. Do I want anything else?
The Cavaliers lost in a disappointing, might be the nicest way I could say this, game against the Charlotte Hornets, where they allowed 118 points to the second worst ranked offense in the NBA. They also allowed the Charlotte Hornets to shoot their best field goal percentage of the entire season. The Charlotte Hornets shot 57.9% from the field, and it was just a showcase for a team that has been horrible all season long. They don't even have 20 wins on the season, might not get 20 wins on the season by the time the year ends. They have 18 wins, and they have about 10 games left on their schedule, and the Cavs could not hold them under 30 points until the fourth quarter. They had 33 in the first, 36 in the second, and 31 in the third quarter, and only allowed 18 in the fourth, but those last buckets were critical. And for a team, the Cavaliers I'm talking about now, that came into the game in Charlotte, the fourth best defensive rated team, a team that now has their two twin towers, Evan Mobley and Jared Allen, back in the paint, they simply did not protect their paint. They were not able to slow them down there. They were allowing lobs and all of those things. Chris, I was very upset with how the Cavs played on defense tonight. And we're not even going to talk about mostly everything else. But the defense, which is what this team is known for, is something that they hold their hat on. And JB Bickerstaff said, even before the game against Charlotte in Cleveland, that that's what they need to do to be successful. That's what they hold their hat on. That's what they can do and can trust in themselves to do on a nightly basis, is get stops when they need stops. Well, they couldn't do that tonight.
It was just a terrible defensive effort. There was no resistance at the point of attack. There was no resistance at the rim. There were multiple times that JB Bickerstaff was chastising players for not protecting the paint, for not challenging shots at the rim, for not taking hard fouls the way that Marcus Morris Sr. did in the matchup on Monday night. Evan Mobley got berated by JB Bickerstaff during one timeout. George Niang, same thing. So it was just a bad night all around on defense. The way that Max Strus put it post game was, none of us wanted to play defense tonight. And it showed. I mean, it was ridiculous. The Hornets suck. Everybody knows that the Hornets suck. And for the Cavs, this was Their 8th worst defensive performance all season long. To Charlotte. Like, it's one thing against Philadelphia, right? They've got Joel Embiid, they've got Tyrese Maxey, they've got Kelly Oubre Jr. They're a good offense. It's one thing if it's the Miami Heat and they got a bunch of dudes that can shoot threes and they can get hot and they run really, really good stuff and they've got Jimmy Butler and Bam. New Orleans, same thing. Zion, Brandon Ingram, like all of this talent. Those are playoff caliber opponents. So it's understandable if sometimes you just don't have it defensively against those teams because they're doing things on the offensive end that you just don't have answers for. That should not be the case against Charlotte. Like, are you kidding me? At some point, you have to show a little bit more resistance at the point of attack. At some point, you have to stop closing out like a doofus and being sloppy with those and lazy with those. There were multiple times, and Sam Merrill said after the game that the Hornets going 5 out created some problems. They were spaced out. They were in scramble mode constantly because the Hornets were moving the ball around and they were all out on the perimeter and all that kind of stuff. But like there were multiple times where George Niang, Jarrett Allen, Evan Mobley, whoever it was that was trying to close out to the perimeter, did it in a lazy way, did it in a non-fundamental way, and then it just led to blow-bys. It was a ridiculous defensive performance by the Cavs. It is one that everybody in that locker room should be embarrassed about. The only good thing, Ethan, is that it only counts for 1 in the loss column. But that was, without a doubt, the worst performance based on the opponent that they were playing against, the caliber of opponent that they were playing against. That was the worst performance defensively all season long, and it's up there with the worst loss of the season, no doubt about that.
Yeah, and we're going to get into the one loss in the loss column and what that means for the Cavs this season and going forward in the standings. But right now, I want to go a little bit more in depth about what Charlotte was able to do against the Cavs. They scored 58 points in the paint. That's 49% of their overall scoring came in the paint. They were able to get 27 points off turnovers. The Cavs had 15 turnovers, and a lot of those were really just sloppy. Not getting the ball to the right person, dribbling into 2 defenders, those types of things. The Cavs got out-rebounded by the Charlotte Hornets. Jarrett Allen, Evan Mobley got out-rebounded by Nick Richards? That is something you don't see from this Cavs team. Jarrett Allen was held under his double-double, under his 10 rebounds. That is something that we have come accustomed to from Jarrett Allen when he is being as successful as we know him to be. And then Brandon Miller just torched the Cavs. He had 31 points on 11 of 19 shooting. I know that Darius Garland holds him into high regards, that he could be in the Rookie of the Year conversation. He's not. It's going to be Chet Holmgren and Victor Wembanyama. But 31 points against the 4th rated defense in the league for a guy that was their sole offense.
He's good, though. He creates problems.
I'm not saying he's not, but 31 points against the Cavs is something different than like 31 points against the Spurs or 31 points against the Trailblazers or something like that. The Cavs get upset when they allow Jason Tatum to get 30 points. They want to hold it to 25 and under or something like that. So for Brandon Miller, a rookie, somebody who is trying to get his footing in this league, but also understands that he has to be the sole attack for the Charlotte Hornets, that's different. You can't take that for granted, like what he was able to do against the Cavs, but I think the Cavs need to take a look in the mirror and say, okay, we say Isaac Okoro should be in the conversation for Defensive Player of the Year. Karis LeVert is somebody that we lean on for the defensive aspect of the ball. Where were you? How can we change that? How can we step up in those moments? And Chris, I even got a little bit excited when Darius Garland hit the 3-pointer to give them the lead late into the game, because it felt like Sam Merrill was showing that he was able to play defense, which Marcus Morris Sr., who I talked to personally, said that he was surprised by his ability to play defense at that level. And then Darius Garland actually creating in the latter half of the game when the Cavs needed it. It felt like it was trending in the right direction, but right after I sent that tweet out, everything went into shambles.
Well, that's the thing, right? So for all the conversation that there was in the locker room about the defense and just how wretched it was, and it was the primary reason for the Cavs losing the game. It wasn't the only reason. They scored 15 freaking points in the fourth quarter. Like, are you serious? I mean, 15 points in the fourth quarter against Charlotte. Come on. Offensively, the Cavs got to be better than that. When it comes to late game execution, they got to be better than that. One field goal in the last 5.5 minutes, going scoreless over the final 3:28, I believe it was. 6 straight empty possessions to finish the game. Multiple turnovers, multiple missed shots, 2 missed free throws as well. Got to be better than that in late game situations. And the execution at the end of the game wasn't good enough. The decision making at the end of the game offensively wasn't good enough. The Cavs didn't get the ball in the hands of the people that the ball needs to be in the hands of in late game situations. So game recognition wasn't good enough. All those things were problematic tonight against Charlotte. And the Cavs have to be better in every aspect moving forward, especially as they're trying to sharpen habits going into the postseason, build some continuity going into the postseason, get into some kind of rhythm going into the postseason. For all the conversation about the defense, and it was awful. The late game offense from this team continues to not be good enough in the absence of Donovan Mitchell. And opponents are seeing this. And when the Cavs get into a 7-game series against whoever it is in the first round, you know exactly what they're going to do in late game situations. They're going to send 2 defenders at Donovan Mitchell and say, all right, we'll take our chances with Darius. We'll take our chances with Karis LeVert. We'll take our chances with Evan Mobley, Jared Allen, whoever is on the court at that point in time. Just not Donovan. And during this stretch without Donovan, the Cavs have shown in late game situations, without their late game alpha, they have not been very good, and they've got a lot of things from that standpoint to work through and figure out moving forward, because teams are going to try and take Donovan Mitchell away in late game situations, and somebody else is going to have to come through at some point, and it just hasn't happened over this stretch.
And quickly before we get into the playoffs, because you mentioned it a couple times and what it looks like for the Cavs, Max Strus was back tonight for the first time. And he was 7 of 13 from the field, 5 of 10 from 3, ended with 19 points and 4 rebounds. He did what the Cavs needed him to do offensively on his first night back. Like, that is something that the Cavs cannot rely on somebody that is coming off an injury, that's playing with minute restrictions. He only played 24 minutes. The only other person in the starting lineup to play 25 or less was Isaac Okoro, who played 25 minutes. Karis LeVert, who came off the bench, played 30 minutes. George Niang, who came off the bench, played 24 minutes. And Sam Merrill the same. So for a guy who just got off a knee injury that had him out for multiple games, and we all know how badly Max Strus wants to play the game of basketball and be on the court, and he did not want to be out at all. He came back and had 19 points, and yet the Cavs still weren't able to find a way to get a win. That's telling to me, Chris. It's something that I would want to keep an eye on going forward because of how much he might have to feel like he has to impact the game, coming back quickly and into the game and into his former roles. And I think it's a lot. And I think that's the same thing that we're thinking about for Donovan Mitchell and Dean Wade when they get back. Like, they're going to have to come back and immediately jump in and try and save this Cavs season. Or not save the season, but help them continue to get their footing before the playoffs. Get the confidence and get the maturity that they need before the playoffs. But speaking of the playoffs, the Cavs, after their loss to the Hornets tonight, and the Knicks won against the Raptors by 44 points, I might add. The Knicks are now in third place in the Eastern Conference, and the Cavs are now in fourth place, a half game behind the Knicks. And we all know that the Knicks have the tiebreaker against the Cavs for this year, and not to mention, Orlando is only a game and a half behind the Cavs in the 5th seed. So, Chris, I did some research and I did some digging, and I put together what I think will be the final standings for this season based on wins and losses. Here's my list. I'm going to go into depth about the teams that we had to look at beforehand after I tell you this list. So, Boston won. Obviously, they're not touchable at this point in the Eastern Conference. Milwaukee, even if the Bucks lose to the Pelicans, Knicks, Celtics, Thunder, and Magic twice over their last 10 games, they'd still get 4 wins, putting them at 50 wins on the season, 50 and 32 to be exact.
I gotta interrupt you because I gotta run downstairs and get my DoorDash.
Oh, he came early.
He came early. So keep going. I'll be back. Don't worry. But he's outside the door waiting for me, so I gotta go get my toothbrush. I don't want to miss out on this toothbrush because it's been such a hassle. I'll be right back.
Okay, I'm gonna keep going. And the Bucks have the tiebreaker against the Knicks this season as well. Basically, the 1 and 2 spots are basically locked up in my eyes. Boston and Milwaukee have those spots locked up. The Knicks, I believe that the Knicks are gonna end the season 49 and 33, going 5 and 5 over their last 10 games. Then I think the Cavs are ending the season 48 and 34, going 4 and 5 over their last 9 games. But even if the Cavs went 49 and 33, which is 5 and 4 over their last 9 games, they would still have to be in the 4th seed behind the Knicks. But if the Cavs finish 50 and 32, which is 6 and 3 over the last 9 games, then they would be able to take the 3rd seed back from the Knicks. But I see that they could either go 4 and 5 over the last 9 games, or they could go 5 and 4 over the last 9 games, which would have them at 49 and 33, which is the same record as the Knicks. And that would mean that the Knicks would still be in the 3rd seed and the Cavs would be in the 4th seed. Then you look at Orlando. Orlando, I believe, is going to end the season 47 and 35, going 5 and 5 over the last 10 games. So that's the 1 through the 5 seed. And then you look at the 6 seed. And I think it's up in the air between Indiana, Miami, and the 76ers for the 6 seed. But more than likely, I see the Cavs playing the Magic in the first round of the postseason, being the 4 and the 5 seed. It's an interesting thing to think about because these two teams have played against each other on multiple occasions this season. And I just think that the Orlando Magic are really coming on one in the latter half of the season. They're gritty, they're tenacious, they really put one on you on the defensive end, and then they got Paolo Banchero who can go off at any moment against the Cavs. He's shown that, and he actually put up multiple big game performances against the Cavs this season. So I really do think if the Cavs match up with the Orlando Magic, it's going to be a difficult series because of just the matchups and what the Orlando Magic bring to the table. It feels like the Magic are the Cavs of last year. They have that tenaciousness, they have that want, they have that desire. And as of right now, after the Charlotte Hornets game, I have not felt that from the Cavs as much as I've seen it with the Orlando Magic this season. So Chris, just to give you a little recap of what I was talking about, the list that I have for the end of the season is Boston, Milwaukee, New York, Cleveland, Orlando, and then it's a toss-up between Indiana, Miami, and the 76ers for the 6th seed. It's pretty clear to me that after looking at my crystal ball and shaking it up a couple times, I think there's a pathway for the Orlando Magic and the Cleveland Cavaliers to face off in the first round of the playoffs, and I wanted to get your take on what you think about this matchup.
I would love it because I get more time in Orlando. Sign me up. Are you kidding me? If I got a choice between Indy and Orlando in the first round, for me, for my travel purposes, for where I'm going to be staying, ho, baby. Oh, I want Orlando. Oh, yes, 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 yes. Miami would be nice too. We can allow the Miami Heat to climb up the standings a little bit and maybe set up a first-round matchup between the Cavs and the Heat. I'll take some days in Miami. Yes, please. However, for the Cavs' purposes, since that's what we're talking about here, I think Orlando could push them in a first-round series. No doubt about it. I think it would take a lot out of them physically and mentally if they were to get past the Magic in that particular series. They're tough, they're physical, they play hard. They have an elite perimeter defender in Jalen Suggs who would be matched up with Donovan Mitchell, which would be worth the price of admission. They've got a lot of size at a bunch of different positions that could bother the Cavs. So offensively, they've got limitations. I think the Cavs defense could find a way to be similar to the defense that they showed in last year's first round against the Knicks. So I do think it would be a bit of a slugfest. I do think it would be pretty low scoring between the two teams for a majority of that series. And I do think there are some advantages that the Cavs would have, experience being one of them. You know, George Niang has been to places where a lot of the guys on the Magic haven't. Same thing when it comes to Max Strus, Donovan Mitchell. So unlike the series against the Knicks last year, where you felt like the Cavs were going to be at a disadvantage because of that, because some of their guys had been on the biggest stage and performed well on that stage, including their coach, who had coached in big games before a number of times in his career. In Jamal Mosley, it's different, right? So there are some advantages that the Cavs would have over Orlando, but I do think that would be a tough matchup. And I do know that there are people inside the organization that would be a little bit queasy just about the physicality, the toughness, and the style and the problems stylistically that the Magic could cause for the Cavs. In saying that, I do think the Cavs would be favored in that series, even if it's slight favorites. I think they would be favored, and I think they should be favored, despite the fact that, you know, March has been a disaster for this organization.
Yeah, and I think rightfully so they should be favored, but I don't think that that means that they're going to be the team that walks away from that series because of the amount of tenacity and the heart that the Orlando Magic have. And I think we've talked about this a lot earlier in the season, and I compared them to them shortly. Like, the Cavaliers of last year were really, really, really gritty and wanted to get after it and wanted to make that push. And having Donovan Mitchell meant a lot for them, and being able to just get to the playoffs for the first time in so long. It was like, okay, we're going to do this. And now the Orlando Magic are seemingly in the same position. They're like, we're going to go at this next team. But there's a difference between the Cavs facing the Knicks last year and the mismatches that were already apparent there in the Orlando Magic, and the Cavs facing off this year, where I don't think there's as many mismatches in that lineup. Paolo Banchero and Jarrett Allen and Evan Mobley and potentially Dean Wade when he gets back. Like, those are the guys that you would see guarding Paolo Banchero. And this season, Paolo has scored 42 against the Cavs, 20 against the Cavs, 18 and 12 against the Cavs. He's done some numbers against this Cavs team. And I don't think that the Charlotte Hornets game is indicative of how the Cavs have played on defense all year long. But if they allow for Paolo to take over a series like that,
Yeah, I don't
then
think they would.
it just would be difficult for them.
Yeah, I know, but playoff basketball is very, very different than the regular season. And Paulo is going to see things in the playoffs that he's never seen before, that he's never felt before, that he's never experienced before. And it's going to be different for him. It's going to be different for Franz Wagner. And Orlando is the 22nd offense in the NBA. They've got flaws, they've got limitations. They scored 93 points tonight against a Warriors team that played the final 44 minutes without Draymond Green because he went all Draymond and got himself ejected in the first 4 minutes of the game. Their leading scorer tonight was Cole Anthony off the bench with 26 points. They had a combined 44 total points in their starting lineup. So again, the Magic have flaws, especially on the offensive end of the floor, that a capable, confident, stifling defense like the Cavs can certainly exploit. And look, the Cavs' defense was great in the first round last year against the Knicks. It was the number one defense in the entire playoffs. So if the Cavs can bring that level of defense to an inexperienced Magic team that struggles to score the ball to begin with, then it just becomes about, can the Cavs muster enough on the offensive end? Can they give themselves more of a chance than what they did in the first round series against the Knicks? And I think they have more firepower. They theoretically have better options on the offensive end. They have better shooting. They have better spacing. They have more weaponry to begin with. So I'm curious to see that the thing that I wonder about the most. Forget all of the stuff that we've seen in March, because March basketball is wonky to begin with, and we're judging the Cavs primarily without 4 members of their top 10 in the rotation, including their MVP candidate and Donovan Mitchell, who is one of the leading scorers in the league. So I just don't know what we gain or how much we gain by judging what we've seen in March, including tonight's game against Charlotte, as terrible as it was. So the thing that I'm monitoring towards the end of this season and into the playoffs is just how much has this offense evolved? How much more diverse are they? So when they get into a 7-game series against a really, really good defensive team, if it's Miami, if it's Orlando, forget about Indiana, they're a terrible defensive team. So if it's New York, if it's Orlando, if it's Miami, just hypothetically, how much better equipped is this offense this year with these new pieces than the one that we saw last year against the Knicks, who are a great defensive team as well? Great defensive teams, sound defensive schemes, teams that play really, really hard, teams that have size and physicality. Those have been problematic for the Cavs. They were last year, and they have at times this year. So just like how much better equipped are these Cavs to handle a 7-game series against a defensive team like the Magic? That's something that I think is going to be the difference between winning or losing that first round series. That's something that I'm going to continue to monitor as this regular season and the final weeks of this regular season play out.
Yeah, Chris, and I want to talk about that 6th seed because you've mentioned Miami, you've mentioned Philadelphia, we talked about Indiana, and Miami and the 76ers have to win 7 of their last games to get to 46 wins. The Pacers have to just win 5 to get to that number. In my head, after looking at both of the schedules, I think the Heat end the season 46-36, going 7-3 over their last 10 games, and the 76ers finish 7-2, going 46-36 on the season over their last 9 games. It looks like that 6th seed is going to be the determining factor more than the top 3, 4, 5 seeds for who the 3rd seed's going to play, because these teams are really coming at each other, and it just looks like this whole Eastern Conference could turn into a scramble by the end of the season, because obviously we understand the NBA is unpredictable. Some teams are going to lose games they're supposed to win, so it happens. Things change. But looking at what these teams are dealing with, looking at the potential return of Joel Embiid in the next week, that 76ers team, as we've mentioned on multiple times during this podcast, would be extremely different with Joel Embiid at the helm rather than Tyrese Maxey trying to take the entire load, which he's been dealing with for over a month since Joel Embiid underwent his surgery, because Joel Embiid was an MVP candidate, an MVP favorite when he was still on the court. And people are saying he's looked good, and people are saying that he is on the cusp of returning. And if the 76ers get Joel Embiid back, let's say they don't get him back till April, they face the Thunder, the Heat, and then the last couple of games in the season, they play the Grizzlies, the Spurs, the Pistons, the Magic, and the Nets. All of those games are winnable for the 76ers with or without Joel Embiid. So that's a ramp up period for Joel. And I just think we have to look at how important it is to get these guys back for the Cavs, like Donovan Mitchell and Dean Wade, for them to get that ramp up period. And Chris, I know Shams put out something about Donovan Mitchell potentially returning on Friday. Have you gotten any insight as to how true that is?
Well, we've talked a lot since that game against Houston, Ethan, in the middle of March when Donovan was complaining about his knee. He wasn't even talking about his nasal fracture. It was all about his knee and how much that was bothering him. Since that point, we have been talking on this podcast, and I've been writing for cleveland.com, that before the end of the month is when the Cavs were expecting Donovan to be back. So Friday certainly lines up with that. Get a game under his belt at home against the 76ers before starting that West Coast road trip, which is going to be absolutely grueling on this team. So that lines up. And I think there are a lot of signs pointing to Donovan being able to make his return Friday against the 76ers. Dean Wade, I think, is going to be back shortly thereafter. The Cavs are actually calling it a knee sprain these days as opposed to knee soreness for Dean Wade, which I think is interesting. I was told that he had an MRI, not this past weekend, but last weekend. Showed no structural damage, nothing that the Cavs were too concerned about, nothing that people close to Dean were all that concerned about. It's just about rest, maintenance, and getting that knee back to a level that it needs to be at for him to be healthy and effective for this team. So I do think the Cavs are getting closer and closer to full strength. I do think there is hope and optimism that that's going to happen before the end of this month. So if you look at the schedule, it certainly lines up for Donovan to return Friday against the 76ers. And if not then, I think it would be the first game of the road trip against Denver. And they need him back. There's no doubt about it. They are a completely different team without Donovan Mitchell, which is no duh. How many teams are different without their MVP candidate? I would say every single one of them in the NBA. That's why those guys are MVPs.
Yeah, and I mean, Donovan is going to have to suit up and get back to action as quick as possible, just like Max Strus. Like, the role that he has left vacant has not been filled by anybody on the Cavs. And we understood when Darius Garland and Evan Mobley were out, many different people were able to step into those roles, more than likely because they were being led by Donovan Mitchell. So with him being out, and him now coming back, his role that most people were trying to figure out, would Darius Garland step up? Would Jared Allen step up? Would Karis LeVert step up? Nobody has been able to fill the shoes of Donovan Mitchell. So now him coming back is going to bring a new look for the Cavs. And I think that's when the Cavs are going to be judged not only by this fan base fairly, finally, but by the organization and what they're looking at before they get into the playoff run.
And it's not just him being back. That's the thing, right? He came back against New Orleans. It's him being back and being effective and being something close to the old Donovan Mitchell. It's not going to happen right away. If it's Friday against Philly, he's not going to be the Donovan Mitchell, at least I don't think, he's going to be the Donovan Mitchell, the MVP candidate Donovan Mitchell from the beginning of the season. I think he's going to have to shake off a little bit of rust. I think he's going to have to try and find confidence in his knee and maybe not worry about getting bashed in the face again when driving to the basket. He's going to have to show a level of explosiveness, stop-start, change of direction, lateral movement, all of that kind of stuff. And I do think that might take a little bit of time, but it's more about how effective he is when he returns to the lineup. And if he can do the things physically that he was doing at the beginning of the season and during that 6-week stretch where Darius Garland and Evan Mobley were out. That was the best level that we have seen consistently from Donovan since he became a member of the Cavs. And that is the Donovan Mitchell that the Cavs need to win a playoff series. And if he's not that effective, if he's just out there being a decoy, if he's just out there being a distributor, if he's just out there to bring confidence and spirit to the team, similar to what he was against New Orleans and Houston when he came off the injury, then that's not going to be good enough for the Cavs. Point blank, period.
Took the words right out of my mouth, Chris. They are going to need Superman, Spider-Man, whatever you want to call him, Donovan Mitchell back to be able to get past the first round. And like we said in our last podcast together, that will be a big determining factor as to whether Donovan Mitchell believes that this team can make it to the second round and further for him to want to stay and be a part of this team long term. So I think that's a great place to wrap up today's podcast. Do you have anything left you want to talk about tonight, Chris?
Not at all.
All right, that'll wrap up today's episode of the Wine and Gold Talk podcast. But remember to become a Cavs insider and interact with Chris and me by subscribing to Subtext. Sign up for a 14-day free trial or visit cleveland.com/Cavs and click on the blue bar at the top of the page. This is where you can get information on when we might think Dean Wade is coming back, and if we can confirm that Donovan Mitchell will play on Friday, this is the first place you will see it. But if you don't like this service, that's fine. All you have to do is text the word STOP. It's easy, but we can tell you that the people who sign up stick around because this is the best way to get insider coverage on the Cavs from me and Chris. This isn't just our podcast, it's your podcast, and the only way to have your voice heard is through Subtext. Y'all be safe. We out.